there's been a sharp rise in the amount of public incidents relating to political mental illness. I'm going to cover a few of those today. Now, the first thing that I do want to note is, before I start playing these, that these are all traits of the left. These are generally the traits that you will find online, and there's a very, very specific reason for that. Now, I'm not forgiving the mental illness of those people, sometimes on the right of politics either. And what are some of those? And I do recognise them. I mean, a lot of the time as you get into right-wing politics, to hold my hands up here for my side of the argument, we can be extremely rigid at times and resistant to various levels of change. The right is certainly more prone to a conspiracy theory, paranoia, and thinking in those terms, particularly as you get to the very far right. There's also a tendency towards authoritarianism and the type of personalities that go with that. And that's been studied extensively as a psychological trait, which leads to kind of black and white thinking. There's no grey areas, it's kind of binary choices. And all of this essentially leads to something called low openness. Now, openness is a personality trait. I'm a little bit different to right-wing people. I have a high degree of openness, and that allows me to do what I'm doing here. But one of the traits which can happen on the right is the low openness, and that is a result of the black and white thinking. And so, whilst I'm not, saying that there are no issues to do with what I would term mental illness on the right, that does happen. It definitely happens, and it's a phenomenon in modern day. I'm going to cover what's on the left primarily because most of the things that I've just listed there lead to an isolationist mindset. So on the right, we're a lot more isolationist in that we tend to burrow into our particular rabbit holes, and we'll think and we'll stamp our feet and do that. Whereas the converse of that is, on the left side of politics, because there's a high degree of openness, there's a lot of, for instance, creative people that are on the left, etc. So because there's a higher degree of openness on the left, generally speaking, the left wing will term it mental illness, comes out in a completely different way, comes out in an overt way, an extroverted way. Now, the final point I'll make before we get into some of this is, I'm labelling this mental illness, and that's kind of a flippant term. I'm not a psychologist or anything of that nature. I'm just a man from Northern England, and I'm using a catch-all term here. So, I'm not a mental health professional, but I'm just using the word mental illness as a kind of a catch-all term, if you like. It's not an official diagnosis, you understand. So, first thing we're going to look at is how our young people are being turned into activist lunatics.
We can't have Elon Musk and people like
Hey, you billionaire, have you forgotten how to share?
Hey, you billionaire, have you
Tesla's not the solution to the climate crisis. We're here today doing a sit-in in the Tesla showroom because Tesla's not as green as they claim to be. While their cars run on electricity, Musk's entire empire runs on exploitation of workers, of the planet, of all of us. It would take us, in the bottom 99%, 1,500 years to match the amount of pollution that a single billionaire makes in about 1 year. We have so much more in common than climate refugees than we do billionaires. It's simple. Abolish billionaires. 100% tax on any wealth over 10 million. Fund public services. Fund climate action. Take their money and fix this mess that we're in. The only people that are going to save us is us.
change your diet for the climate? Eat the red.
Okay, so we'll very quickly breeze through all of these claims that this young lady seemed to make. First of all, she said that Elon Musk was destroying the planet. Well, you may or may not like Elon Musk, I don't know, but you could argue that Elon Musk has done quite a bit for the planet. He created Tesla, for instance, and that electric car revolution, the electric powered revolution seems to be what everybody is talking about as the solution. So in that respect, Mr. Musk can be said, certainly he's done more for the planet than I have, and I'm guessing that he's done more for the planet than you have as well. So, I mean, that's a silly statement. And then, of course, there's the knowing little look with, the little giggle at the end, which I quite enjoyed. He's not the solution that you think he is. Well, perhaps he's not, I don't know. But certainly, as I've just said, of all the people on the planet, it could be argued that he's done more than most. She then went on to say something quite curious, I thought, which was, Musk's entire empire runs on exploitation of workers, plant, and all of us. Well, I certainly don't feel exploited by Elon Musk today. I live in Northern England, and I can't remember the last time Elon Musk exploited me. I do go on to X and I do pay for my blue check mark on there. And so that being the case, I suppose you could argue that he's taken some money from me there. That was the only time he's ever done so. I don't own a Tesla. And so really, he's not exploiting me in any way. Really, I think this young lady here would be struggling to justify the fact that Elon Musk's empire is exploiting workers. I mean, certainly he doesn't force anybody to go to work, so he'll offer them a salary, and if those people want to work for one of Mr. Musk's companies, then they get the choice to do that. So in terms of exploitation, I gather that he pays his workers quite well. He certainly runs a lean operation in that he doesn't have people doing nothing. He's very, very focused on that, as you see in these recent Doge exploits. But certainly exploitation of workers, I really don't see that. Then comes a very, very staggering claim, which was the bottom 99% of people could operate and run their lives for 1,500 years and they wouldn't match the pollution made by a single billionaire in about 1 year. So if you just stop for a second and think about that statement, every single person in the bottom 99% does use, fossil fuels. We all pollute the planet in some way, if you want to look at it like that. And 99% of people, that's 99% of 7 billion people. And so there aren't that many billionaires in the world. And how much do those billionaires actually produce? Well, there is actually people working for the companies that these billionaires work for as well. So I would say that the claim that the bottom 99% of people match the pollution that a single billionaire makes in about a year, and it takes 99% of people 1,500 years. I think that's patently silly. It's a silly statement to make. And then, of course, we get the cross-pollination of left-wing beliefs here, which is that we have more in common with climate refugees than we do with billionaires. There's no way to justify that, so I'm just going to get rid of it. Climate refugees as well. Well, I mean, what are climate refugees? If there's a natural disaster in your country which is possibly related to climate, then you could move to another part of the country. Or you could just say, this is what happens in my part of the world. I'm not a fan of the term climate refugees. Then the next claim, which is, we're dipping just into, socialist idiocy. Abolish all billionaires and take 100% or 100% tax on any wealth over 10 million. So let's look at that. So what would happen if we took all money from all billionaires and we left them all with 10 million? The governments would take all of that money and it would be spent within 3 months. Because it would just be eaten up with the debt payments. It would just be the case that we would be borrowing less money. We could take the billions from people. So let's say that America was to take, Jeff Bezos's, and I don't even know how much he has. I probably should have checked that before this video. But let's say he has 100 billion. So let's say the American government take 99 billion. So what next? So that money's gone, and so Mr. Bezos has no money to invest in stuff going forward. He can't start any new companies, etc. You see the silliness of 100% tax on wealth above a certain amount. What you do is you're just taking money out of the future economy. But again, these are children's arguments, as is the case with a lot of socialist arguments. And the final statement, change your diet for the climate, eat the rich. So that's just a slogan, a catchphrase. I don't actually believe that these people are advocating cannibalism. But certainly it's a decent catchphrase. But again, then we're moving into you shouldn't be eating meat and we should all be vegans. Now, looking at that young lady there, one of the telltale signs of people who are becoming more unhinged is the ability to see the whites of their eyes all the way around. So they become very, very enraged, and what they'll do is you'll be able to see someone's eyes literally popping out of their head, as this young lady appears to be. She was also, I do note, reading her script from a mobile phone, which was kept hidden. That's obviously an embarrassment for climate activists who are talking about Tesla, given that mobile phones do far more damage to the environment than virtually anything else on the planet. All of the rare earth minerals needed, as well as in Teslas, yes, but the rare earth minerals needed to subsidize and create all of the mobile phones on the planet. And, in addition to that, these mobile phone companies selling you a brand new one every year, if that's what you're willing to accept. I personally am an advocate of using your mobile phone till it breaks. But particularly companies like Apple, they love you to be upgrading every year. That's why they bring out a new version of the phone every year. So they bring out a new version and they will say to you, oh, the new iPhone, 386 is out and this one has something special on it. And that's what they do. If they brought out a brand new mobile phone every 5 years, then perhaps they could be forgiven. But this young lady isn't protesting those people because she appears like she quite likes her mobile phone. And what's the most worrying aspect of this? Well, the most worrying aspect in the young that I see is this type of activist mindset. When I was young, I was very arrogant, as most people are when they're young, and they believe that they've worked out the world. However, I never really wanted to change the world. I was arrogant enough to believe that I understood everything when I was 17 years old. However, I never actually wanted to go out and tell people that I'd worked it out and that they were all doing the wrong thing. I was quite happy doing my thing. So what is the reasons for this young lady thinking that this behaviour is normal, thinking that it's okay to walk into a business and to start shouting into a camera, telling everybody that you've worked it out? Well, the first thing to note is the parents. The parents of these people encourage activism. My children aren't activists. Now, I'm not saying I'm special or whatever it is. What I'm saying is that I've never ever discussed politics with my children unless they've come and asked me. And they generally don't ask me because it's not a big topic, strangely enough, in my household. I talk about it here because I find it very interesting, but that's not a reason for me to go walking around my house turning my children into right-wing lunatics. That's not what certainly what I'm about or what would be good for society. The second thing to note is that schools do this. Now, I remember a climate action day where all of the teachers were so proud of their children and they all were taking their little flags out. And there was a range of children from 3 years old, certainly from primary, and then into, secondary school as well. And they were all out there, the full age range of children. And they were all becoming little activists. And that's not even getting into the activism that happens on university campuses, which is out of control, socialist professors, and, the absence of any right-wing thought in universities is turning these people into, mini activists, if you like. And the final part of this trifecta of silliness is the politicians. So you'll have various people. One notable one is when Angela Rayner called people from the right scum. And I actually put it to somebody who I knew who was quite close to me. And we had a bit of a jape about it. And then the person muttered under their breath, yeah, but we all really know that when you get down to it, that people on the right are a bit scummy. And that was slotted into the conversation. And this is how people are brought up in this activist mindset. So we've got the parents, we've got the school and the education system, and then we've got the politicians, and then we'll just sprinkle on a little bit of media on there. And our liberal media as well is turning a lot of people into this type of activism. And so for these reasons, something has to change. Something has to change in, how our education... You can't change parents. And so you're going to have to change the education system in some way. Or you're going to have to change how politicians act and talk. Or you're going to have to change how the newspapers do it. But either way, I don't see any end to this current crop of, the ideology relating to climate activism, climate refugees, veganism, abolishing billionaires, or all of this stuff is a bad turn for society. And then we get on to some adults. So let's have a look at some adults here. And here's a person making a statement.
Hello, my name is Scarlett Kelly, and I am officially declaring war on the Republican Party. If you are a Republican on TikTok and you want to interact with me, you deserve to die. You deserve to be shot. You deserve whatever suffering could possibly come to you. If you are a Republican and try to start any of that kind of nonsense with me in person, you will lose your life. This is war. I am not joking. It's done. You are not an American anymore. You're out. You're off the list. You've been naughty. Come on. We're going to start giving you the coal in the form of massive stones on top of a slab of wood on top of you. Have a wonderful day.
There's very little you can say to that. Somebody saying that you should die because of your political beliefs is the ultimate extension of where this is going. This is what's happening in America, and what filters in America, we're culturally downstream from America, and so what's going to happen is we're going to be getting a slice of this. We're going to be getting this unless we turn a corner and start acting like adults in relation to political beliefs, in relation to how our politicians talk, how our education system works, because otherwise this is going to be entering into our culture quite soon, and we're going to be openly talking about murdering people who don't have our political beliefs. And at that point, we're in for a world of hurt. Now, one thing that I do find exceptionally funny, and I'm going to play you, I'm not going to comment specifically on them, I'm going to play you a range of videos here of various adults who are so mentally unhinged by the current state of politics that they've decided that their best political expression is to key Teslas. So they'll pass a Tesla in the street. They won't know anything about the person that owns that car. They won't know anything, about what that person believes in or anything else like that. And indeed, a few years ago, Tesla was the car of the left. It was the electric car. It was viewed as one of those things. And then, of course, Elon Musk got into politics, and then that all changed. And then after it all changed, Elon Musk is the enemy, and so is Tesla, the company. And so when you're passing one of these cars, one of the things that these people like to do, they like to stop and key a car. And I find this to be exceptionally strange. What a strange thing to wake up on a morning, to go out of your house, and as you're driving around to think, I know, a good way to express myself today is that I'm going to attack the personal property of this complete stranger who I've never met and indeed never even seen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to damage their property, and I'm going to get back into my car or walk down the street, and I'll have done a good thing for humanity. And whilst we can look at various things, this is mental illness. And so what are the traits of the left? Higher rates of anxiety and depression. Many studies have shown that people who identify as liberal or left-leaning report higher levels of anxiety and depression and neuroticism. Okay, especially left, particularly women, as you saw in that video there, they experience a lot more mental health struggles. There's a lot on young women. When you look at them, they've got the imagery that they're bombarded with on their mobile phones, which makes them feel inferior all the time. Same thing with men, incidentally. You've got these, Wolverine-type masculine figures online, and these go to make men feel very, very insecure, let alone the dating epidemic, where you go on to I'm told anyway, I don't use any dating apps, but you go on one of these apps, and only the top 10% of men ever have any success on there. And this is creating the disparity, and it creates more mental illness, and that's linked, of course, to internet culture. Another thing that happens to left-leaning people, they have a victim mentality, and there's a learned helplessness where they believe that if their politician gets voted in, then their life will be much better, and because another politician's been voted in, then their life is completely ruined, and they need to leave the country. And you'll actually see quite successful people do this, like when celebrities say, if Trump gets elected, I'm leaving the USA. And this is all very, very, very strange behaviour, particularly coming from intelligent and successful people. But it does goes to show that on the left of politics, it does affect all different types of people. And, these cluster B personality traits, narcissism, borderline personality disorder, antisocial behaviour, these are all displayed in all of these people doing what they're doing here. And there's a cognitive dissonance. These people know deep down that what they're doing is wrong. And you can see when they're approaching it, these aren't people who've been criminals. These are normal, everyday people who've been gripped in this illness. And as a result, there's part of their brain saying, don't do this, don't do it, you shouldn't be doing this. And there's another part of their brain saying, yes, do it, this is right, this is politically correct, you need to be doing this. And so, looking at all of these things, we're looking at adults displaying severe mental health illness. And when you're looking at children displaying this, and you're looking at adults doing it, and this is all happening at the moment in America. And you see there, the young lady, she's taken on that badge there, and she's now protesting Tesla showrooms in England. And Elon Musk doesn't live in England. She's protesting a car company that mainly makes its cars in America. And I don't know whether anybody else sees the absurdity of that. All of these things get mixed in, and as a result, what we're looking at here, this current way that society is disseminating politics is extremely worrying, and it doesn't really look like there's any turning back at the moment. It doesn't really look like it's going to reverse. I hope it does reverse soon. We need to go back to sensible thinking and sensible political debate. But these overt displays of mental illness are only going to increase. And it's a very, very worrying trajectory for Western culture. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Thanks very much for your time.